Hello, and welcome to another First Chapter Friday. I am very excited about this week's book. This week's book is Peter Lee's Notes from the Field. It's by Angela Ahn. I'm excited about this book because I'm actually reading it right now and I'm loving it. I'm loving it so much. I said, I've got to share first chapter with everybody, and that's why I decided to share this one with you. I picked out this book from the library because of the cover. I just thought the cover looked like tons of fun. You can tell it's a little boy named Peter. He does lots of things. He's in the dinosaurs, obviously, and exploration. And I see he's obviously got a sister over here. He likes to play soccer. And this lets me know there's probably somebody in his world that kind of he's not too fond of. But he just seemed like a neat kid just looking at the cover. And so I said, I want to give this one a try. And I did. And I'm glad that I did because I really like it. So I wanted to share it with you. We're going to do chapter 1 today, First Chapter Friday. Chapter 1, May the Force be with you. Tuesday, May 14th, lunch. Conditions, light rain, high humidity. The ball came at me so fast, I barely had time to throw my right hand up in the air to block it. But just like the Dinosaurus, a dinosaur from the late Cretaceous period, I have unusually long arms. The leather of the ball grazed my gloved fingertips. I had just counteracted a basic scientific law. The ball would have stayed in motion and sailed right through the goalpost if I haven't applied the smallest amount of force. Force wreaks havoc on motion. And in this case, it caused the ball to change its trajectory, leading to the sweetest sound a goalie can hear, thunk. The ball firmly hit the goalpost and rebounded back into play. That was a close one. No! Ryan Gagnon screamed as he clenched his fist and arched his back in frustration. You got lucky, Peter! He clearly did not understand physics at all. Luck has no part in science. We glared at each other briefly, and then Ryan ran ahead to keep close to the action. I leaned against my goalpost and watched the other boys run back to the far end of the field. It wasn't long before they stopped to argue. I did not, Ryan shouted. I saw it, Ryan. You're lying. Joe Flores threw his hands up. It was totally a handball. Joe was my good buddy and an excellent judge of character. The rain was starting to come down, but we never called games off because of the weather. Sometimes I walked around with wet shoes all day and didn't notice until I got home and peeled my socks off. Instead of toes, I had stinky prunes. It looked like the argument was going to be a while. So I ripped off my goalie gloves and patted my front pant pockets. I felt the familiar lumps of my small coil notebook in my left pocket and my inhaler in my right pocket. My asthma was getting better the older I got. I hadn't even had to go to the emergency room in a few years, but I was still supposed to take a dose every day and an extra dose before exercise, not during exercise. Sometimes, like today, I forgot to follow the plan. I made sure it was a good time to turn my back to the game so I could privately take a quick puff. The game had come to a complete stop. Even if he had touched the ball, Ryan would never admit to it. Joe was trying to argue, but this was Ryan. I sighed and waited for the game to resume. I needed to keep loose. I swung my long arms around like helicopter blades. As a goalie, the only player on the field who can use their arms, all this height had an advantage. At 5'9", I am the tallest boy in my 5th grade class. I get to stand in the middle of the back row for the class photo. That's the top dog spot, and it's been mine for years. I am really freaky tall if you factor in the Korean thing. The Korean thing being that I'm a Canadian-born Korean. Koreans are known for lots of things. Electronics, cheap cars with weird company name, addictive TV shows, and K-pop. But Koreans aren't known for their height. I break all the rules. As the argument got more heated, I watched Samuel Park leave his basketball game and casually saunter up to Ryan and the other boys. Samuel and his friends in 6th and 7th grade played basketball on the court right next to the end of the soccer field. As soon as they saw Samuel coming, Joe and Ryan stopped arguing. They stood frozen, waiting in anticipation for Samuel to speak. If a person could be so cool that it left everybody else feeling chilled, that was Samuel. Samuel was the only other Korean boy in the whole school. And sometimes we saw each other at family parties because his grandmother was friends with Hammy, my grandmother, and he would always be polite, but just not overly talkative. It was the same at school. He had this quiet bad boy vibe about him, like you wouldn't be totally surprised to see him sitting in the principal's office because he either got in trouble or because he was helping with something. He was hard to figure sometimes. I mean, he wasn't my friend, but he didn't treat me like carrion either. From the other end of the soccer pitch, Samuel gave me his usual chin-up greeting, which I returned. I couldn't hear everything Samuel was saying, but I did catch, "Who cares, dudes? Get a life and just play. This ain't the World Cup." Samuel sounded disgusted. He flicked his hand through his hair, dismissing them. When Samuel spoke, fifth graders listened. He said his piece and slowly walked back to the basketball court. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. Even when he was sweaty, it wasn't gross. It was athletic. I held on to the goalpost for balance to stretch out my calf while watching the argument get sorted out. When they stopped talking, I jumped to the center of the goal. I put my goalie gloves back on and assumed my ready stance. "Game's on!" Liam shouted down the field to me. Liam and I had only one thing in common: our last names. Liam was also a Lee. But he was the Chinese kind, not the Korean kind. He was Ryan's best friend. Was it a coincidence that they were both like two tiny barky attack dogs? I doubt it. Joe was running across the field, dribbling the ball between his feet. He was speedy and had good control of the ball. His Vancouver Canucks shirt was a blur of blue and green as he danced around the field, looking downfield for an open player. Ryan started the charge at him, trying to take possession of the ball from Joe. Ryan had intense, angry eyes, which was kind of just his everyday look. Joe was having none of that. He kicked the ball so hard that Ryan barely had time to get out of the way. It ricocheted off Ryan's backside. Kinetic energy at its best. I couldn't stop the ha that came out of my mouth. His pale gray track pants were left with a dirty, wet, circular stain right on his butt. He'd have to walk around like that all day. It was perfect. I saw a lopsided smile flash across Joe's face. That stain was going to make Ryan even madder. The ball rolled out of the soccer field and bounced toward the playground closer to the school. Because the rain had started to come down hard, the playground was empty, except for LB. I eyed my little sister from across the field. No matter the weather, she was always in the playground, even if she was alone. She was usually alone anyway. The boys cupped their hands around their mouths and shouted, "LB!" They pointed to the ball. My little sister had been whizzing back and forth on the zip line. When she reached the end of the line, she gracefully jumped onto the platform and skipped to the ball, which had come to a stop near her. LB picked up the ball and balanced it in her right hand. She looked like a baseball pitcher at the ready. Her body turned to the side, her elbow bent, and then her high leg kick. The ball flew through the air in an impossibly long arc. "Whoa," said Liam. His cheeks were flushed and his dark hair shiny with sweat. I watched him as he watched the ball fly through the air. "Thanks," the other boys shouted across the field as the ball landed near his feet. "Hi, Petey," she yelled, waving. I shooed her away. The game was back on. Unlike me, LB was small. She was the smallest child in her second grade class. She sat in the front row on the end of the bench in her class photo. That's the shrimp spot. Nobody wants the shrimp spot. In this year's class photo, LB wore yellow leggings with a unicorn pattern all over them and a white t-shirt covered in rainbows. Her socks even had pink hearts. You could see the pattern poking out between her running shoes and the hem of her pants. She always dressed herself in a way that made her look, I don't know, kind of loud and flashy, like an exploding glitter bomb. Sometimes all the girl stuff on her clothes was a bit much. Even the rain jacket she was wearing right now was covered with sparkly bits. She was hard to miss. As Ryan ran by me, he said in his mocking, squeaky voice, "Hi, Petey." I tried to swat at his back with my gloved hand, but I missed. He didn't have a younger sibling who humiliated him like I did. I had a love-hate thing with Ryan. I loved to hate him. The bell rang, and as I half jogged, half walked back to class, I heard the supervision aide blow her whistle and yelled at LB, like she does almost every day. Last one in again, LB. Get back to class. And that is the end. Chapter 1. Peter Lee's Notes from the Field. I hope you gave it a try. It is pretty good, and I hope you enjoy it too. Thanks so much.